Hey, welcome to Caspio Live. My name is Ned. Let me know if you can hear me okay. If you are able to hear me, please let me know in the chat window and we can begin with today's content on how to build an environmental impact tracker application, which you can see here in the upper left of my screen. So if you are able to hear me okay, please let me know in the chat window and we will go ahead and begin with the presentation today. I would like to get into the building process quickly. So that we can, complete the application. We have about 12 data pages to build for today's live stream. All right, so let's go ahead and begin. Hey, Joel, nice to see you. Thanks for letting me know. Thumbs up, good to go. So I was approached by a prospect to build this application. They gave me a very basic scope of what they wanted to create. Obviously, we don't sign any NDAs because I always let them know in advance. The expectation is that whatever scope you give me, it'll be exposed in a live stream to a larger audience because we have attendees and people watching these videos afterwards. So they gave me a very bare minimum scope and the workflow for the application. But the idea is, for this company, and I'm using a fictitious name, Ecolabs, they're going to provide their clients with the ability not just to measure, but also mitigate their ecological footprint. And it can be in different industries too, right? So let's say we're looking at, for example, maybe a manufacturing company. And let's say this company is facing some pressure from stakeholders, maybe some regulations to go ahead and reduce their carbon and waste output or emissions and things like that. So that's where Ecolabs comes into play. They're going to provide a login for these companies and their clients. And once the clients log in, they can add activities, metrics, units, and then Ecolabs will have sophisticated reporting where they can track and measure the output from these submissions and provide these reports back to their clients to optimize and improve performance. So that's really the idea behind this application. I thought it was a very interesting use case. And I asked a bunch of questions in terms of how you plan on monetizing from this application. They're going to charge per user basically, but all the payments will be handled offline. And it's not going to be part of the system. Can somebody let me know if you can hear a noise in the background, or is the noise coming through? Can you hear like a droning noise? I just want to make sure that you can hear me okay and it's not... No noise? Okay, good to know. Okay, thanks for letting me know. So that's the application that we're going to build today. Let's go into Caspio. But before I build the application, I do want to show you just a simple workflow here so that you can see what the app is about. Again, it's a very minimal scope. They're going to have many more reports, forms, and things like that. But the workflow is there, and that's really all they wanted to see. Now, as Ecolabs, we can log in and we have the ability to add a new company that we can add to the system. We can manage companies, and each company will have their own users that they're going to be able to log in. So let's say for ABC Inc., if we wanted to add an additional user for them, we go to manage users, and here I can add a new user that eventually is going to be able to log in and submit these activities and metrics. And then here on the dashboard side as Ecolabs, we're able to now see the output from those submissions. We can filter data based on company name. We can filter based on activity type. And of course, there's likely going to be some kind of a date range so that we can see additional reporting output. And then on the flip side, when we log in as the customer or the client, we can submit a new activity. It can be manufacturing, it can be transportation. They might have different employees logging in for each company in their own department, and they're going to be measuring different type of output. Maybe water usage, energy usage, and then when you see the activities, you can add and view metrics for those activities. So for example, welding, and again, this is just fictitious data that I'm adding. There's no actual data here. It's probably not even the correct unit or value. I'm just submitting some metrics here so that later on you can see how we can run reports based on those submissions. But I can add a new metric, new value, new unit, And then Ecolabs will eventually print out these reports, send those reports to their clients on how to optimize. With that said, let's dive into Caspio and let's see how we can create this application. Now, if you're new to these live streams, keep in mind that because it takes time to build the application, we do not build the tables because that would be very time consuming and that would eat up a lot of our time. So the tables are already created. You can see we have 7 tables. I will go through each table just so that you can see the structure. So let's start off with the Ecolab user. So this is the company that's going to log in to be able to view dashboards, add companies, and users for each company. Now in this table, it's very simple. We have the Ecolab user ID. That's the primary key. Name of the user, email, and password. You could have other fields, and likely they will have other fields in the table. But again, we're keeping it minimalistic for the live stream today. So that's my first table. The second table that we have is going to be the companies table. When this user logs in, they're going to be able to add companies. And these are their clients. So we have the company ID, that's the primary key, and all the information pertaining to each company. Each company will have many users. So that's this table down here. So these are the customers that are going to be logging in. It's a one-to-many. One company can have many users. So you will see in this table how we have not only the user ID as the primary key, but we also want to stamp the company ID because we want to associate our users back to our companies. Just like in my live example here, we add a company and then you have many users belonging to each company. That's our second table. The third table that we're going to look at is going to be the activities table. So when the user logs in, they're going to be able to add activities. So let's take a look at this table. You can see we have the activity ID, we have the user ID, and then we have all the information pertaining to the activity, right? So when we add the user that belongs to each company, that user will be able to log in with their credentials and be able to submit activities. And we want to stamp the user ID so that we know which user from what company added that activity. And the last one-to-many setup that we have the metrics to the activities. So we're going to look at this table. You can see how we're stamping the activity ID, and we have the metric type, value, and unit. The value is going to be a number data type because you might have decimals that you're tracking as well. So we went over the user table, we went over the companies table, activities table, metrics table, and the user table. And the last 2 tables that we have are the lookup tables. They're very simple tables. We have the activities lookup, where we store all of our different types of activities. It's only one field, and it's text 255. And my second lookup table is for units. Again, just one field, and in my data sheet tab, you will see that we're tracking these types of units for values. And those are all of our tables. 7 tables, to be exact. I have one view created. We're going to create an additional view later in today's live stream, but I have one view now created to filter out active users. You can see in my design that each user will have a checkbox next to them to flag who's going to be able to log into the application and who won't be able to log into the application. So Ecolabs has the ability to control. Let's say if this company no longer wants to pay for an additional user, we can deactivate that user, uncheck the box, and now Ned will no longer be able to log into the application. The whole system will be per user, so they will have fees per user and have to pay for that seat in order to log in. So that's why we have this checkbox here. And then in my view, for active users, we simply edit. Let me just show you how this was built. And in the criteria tab, we used a field status to flag that it's checked. So if any user is checked in the table, we are going to be able to see those users listed inside the view. Okay, and at the moment, all the users within the table are active, and we should be able to see them in the view. Finally, we have 2 authentications. We have one for the customer, and we have one for the Ecolab user. This is a very simple setup. In my live stream, I tend to use the standard table or view for authentication. but you have other options here as well. You can use directories, you can use social media, or you can use SAML SSO, single sign-on. I tend to use the standard tabular view. You can see this one is based off of the user table. Yeah, this one is based off of the user table, and we have our two login fields, email and password. Hit save, and that's how you create the authentication for Ecolab user. And my second authentication is for the customer. And this one is based off of a view, okay, that's filtering only the active user from each one of those companies. And again, we have email and password. We hit save or finish, and then you have two authentications created. Another thing that we build in advance just to save on time is the redirect login. Very useful if you're looking to hide the navigation menu from the login screen. That's really the main purpose of building an HTML data page that redirects. I will show you what that redirect looks like in just a second. But you can see from my login screen for the admin user, I'm not showing the navigation screen. You have to log in first. Same thing with the customer. I do not show the navigation screen or navigation menu until you've logged in. So because I've already created this so many times in previous live streams, I don't go through the steps of creating it, but I will just simply show you. If I click edit, we use an HTML data page. You authenticate based on whoever the role is. In this case, this one is for Ecolab user. And then we have this very simple one line of script. It's a very simple redirect, window.location equals, and then when the user logs in, I want to send him or her to this web page. Okay, so if I log in as the admin, okay, this is my sample user. You can see at the moment I'm on this web page, but as soon as I log in, I go to admin_dashboard.html, and that's what this script is doing. It's redirecting the user, so then now I can see my second one is for the customer. Does the same exact thing, HTML data page, using the customer authentication this time. And again, it's the same script. I want the customer to be redirected to this URL upon logging in. So once I log in as myself, who happens to be a sample user, I will be taken to customer_my_activities. And that's what you see in this URL. Okay. And now we're going to begin developing all of the other data pages that we demoed earlier in the live stream. So the first thing that I would like to do is, let's say we are logging in as the admin. Okay, I would like the ability to add a company on this web page. So I need to build a submission form that allows the admin user to create a new company. So we go to data pages. We will close this folder for now, and we're going to build our data pages inside the admin folder. So we create a new data page. We're going to need a submission form. We're going to hit next, and then we're going to use the companies table as the data source. And let's call this new company. For my style, I always like to use one of the preloaded styles that we provide. However, if you're new to Caspio and you want to customize your own template, your own color palette, you don't have to use one of these preloaded styles. You can go to the styles object and you can fully modify your own style in terms of color for the labels, color for the fields. We even give you access to the CSS, so you can supersede our own default styles that we provide. So I will just use blue. For my localization, I will use English. Localization is all about regional settings. So if you wanted to change, let's say, the date format, or maybe the currency from dollar to pound, and also the language. So if you want the buttons, the search buttons, the submit buttons, or any other default text provided by Caspio to be translated into one of these languages, you can select one of the preloaded ones, or you can fully customize your own localization depending on where you're deploying that application. We want to restrict access to our Ecolab user. We're going to hit next, and then we need to include, in this case, I need all of my fields in the form. So we're going to hit next. And now as an Ecolab user or an admin, The name field is likely going to be a required field. We need to have something submitted into the database. Description field could be an optional field, but we'll make that a text area so that we can see long text. And then it's up to the company that's building the application if they want these fields to be required or optional. Completely up to whoever is designing and building this application. Date created can be a timestamp. So it's a hidden field, but upon submission, we're going to stamp the date and time. And that's really all the changes I need to make here. We're going to hit finish to save. And just like that, we have our first data page created for the admin. We will deploy that data page now. We'll grab our embed code, copy it. And I use Notepad++ for my HTML pages. I always like to say this in every one of my live streams. If you're new to Caspio and attending these live streams, you do not have to use code HTML documents if you're not familiar with that. My recommendation is to use a very simple website builder like Webflow or maybe Weebly or WordPress. It is compatible with Caspio, and they have more of a drag and drop type system rather than you looking at the code the way I am at the moment. So I have created this web page called Admin New Company, and I am going to paste my Caspio code here and save my document, okay, my HTML page. So I like to publish one page at a time. As soon as I deploy my data page into my HTML document, I like to use, and I use WinSCP protocol to send my local files to my hosting, and it's hosted by Caspio, this URL called SumApp. So here let me actually go into the right folder, the right directory here, EIT Live and EIT Live. All right, so now I modified my web page called Admin New Company, this one here. We just saved it, and I will move this web page to my hosting provider. And now that it's available in my hosting provider, I will go to that page, reload, and we will now be able to see that form deployed on our web page. Okay, so it's really that simple. Now that we can add companies as Ecolab user, we should also be able to view those companies. So let's build this data page next. All right, so we're going to go down to reports, tabular format, hit next. And again, my data source is going to be the companies table because we need to output the information from that table. We're submitting companies into that table. My report needs to show information from the same table. So let's call this manage or view companies. You'll have your own naming convention. For my style, we're going to use blue, and for my localization, we'll once again use English. And again, I need to restrict access to the Ecolab user. Click next. Do we want to have the ability to search? Well, perhaps, yeah. Let's say you have a lot of clients. Let's say you have 100 companies who are using your system. In that case, I do recommend to have a search field. Initially, maybe you won't have a need for it, depending on how many clients you have paying to use your system. But yeah, eventually you might have a lot of clients. So I recommend having a search form, maybe have the results appear underneath the search form and display the results on the initial load. We are going to hit next. And let's have the ability to search based on the company name. You could have other fields too if you wanted to. It's up to you. Just to speed things up for company name, we're going to use comparison type contains. It's more like a partial keyword search. So if I type in a letter A for company and I click search, it's going to return all the companies that contain letter A. You could also have drop downs. It's up to you, but we're going to just stick with a text field and continue. Now, what information do we want to display on the results page? Well, let's have the name of the company. I think that's important. Let's have maybe description. We can truncate the text if it's long text. Address, city, and state, and zip. I always like to include inside an HTML block because I like to concatenate all of those values together. Instead of seeing 4 different columns for address, city, and state in a tabular report, there's a little shortcut that you can have inside the HTML block to make it look a little bit more legible and nicer. You can see in my live example when we go to manage companies how I combine all of those values into a single column rather than having 4 different columns with that information. So I'll show you how that's done in just a second. Maybe we have date created, and then on the results page, sorry, here you have the ability to make data modifiable or editable if you wish as an Ecolab user, but let's just keep everything as read-only and continue. Now I'm going to include my HTML block, maybe underneath the name field, and inside this HTML block, we can add those fields as parameters. So let's add the address field, and underneath the address field, we'll have state, city, and zip. So city, state, and zip. And we'll call this label address. So now you have one column, and you're displaying all of that information like an address, like you would when you're maybe like sending an envelope or something like that, rather than having 4 different columns. Now, description field, this is likely going to be long text, so you might have long descriptions, and if that's the case, in the advanced tab, you can say truncate, and let's truncate to maybe 40 characters and allow the user to expand and collapse that long text. And one more thing that we're going to need to add here is another HTML block. And I'm going to show you a live example of that HTML block called Manage Users. What you want to do is when you click on this link, you're going to send this company ID inside the URL as a query string parameter. So as soon as you click on this hyperlink, you can see that I'm passing the company ID to this page. And on this page, we're going to receive this ID and connect all of these data pages to the ID that we passed. And the reason why is because I need to be able to display the company information that's tied to that ID. And I also need to be able to add my users and stamp the company ID inside a user table. That's how you associate the user back to the company. There's a hidden field here that's receiving this ID. And upon submission, we are stamping this ID into the user table. So that's what we need to build next. But before we do that, let's call this link Manage Users. We're going to highlight the text. Click on the link button to turn this into a link, not just plain text. And then my destination URL, let me just see what I called that page. I called it Admin Company Details. That's the name of that web page. So admin_company details. .html, and now we need to pass the company ID as a parameter. So we add the question mark. I always like to abbreviate my parameter names. CID stands for company ID. We need to add an equal sign, and at the end, we are going to insert the company ID that we plan on passing. Click OK, and you can see how that now creates a hyperlink for us. One thing that you want to do here is go into source really quickly and remove this protocol HTTP to keep the path relative. Okay, so if you're in the same directory and you're going from one web page to another, you want to make sure that you remove that HTTP, otherwise you're going to get a broken link and it's not going to take you anywhere. And this is how you maintain a relative path. So again, just to explain one more time, when we click on this link Manage Users, we're going to pass this company's ID to this page. Okay, so we're going to hit next. Let's display 25 companies. It's up to you how many companies you want to display. We're going to hit next. And because I'm creating a custom details page for each company, there's really no need for a details page. We're going to hit finish, save, and let's deploy this data page by grabbing our deploy code, going into our notepad, and admin companies. We're going to paste that deploy code, save it, and let's publish this live. Admin companies, here it is. And we should be able to now see the companies. Now this sample data that you see here, I've already added in before. Okay, so that's why we already have some data in our table. But just so we can, go through the steps, let's add a new company here. Why don't we say random company? Long text. Why don't we grab some text? I'll just do this really quickly. So you can see how truncate works with the description. Address 123, address, city name, state, maybe New York, zip code, and hit submit. All right, when we go back to manage companies, you will now see that company. And you can see how truncate works. If you have long text, now we can expand and collapse that text. All right, so now when we click on this link, Manage Users for ABC Inc., let's just say, you will see how I'm passing the company ID. And now what we want is to build out these data pages that are going to receive that company ID. And that's how you link your data pages back and forth using the query string parameter that we pass in the URL. So everything ties together using the ID that we pass in the URL. So let's begin by building this custom details page for the company. So new data page, reports, custom details page, click next, based off of the company's table once again, and we're going to call this company details. Style again is going to be blue, localization English, restrict access to our Ecolab user, click next. And this time we're going to filter our data based on a predefined criteria because I'm already clicking on the link for ABC Inc. So I know I'm going to be looking at the details for ABC Inc. Okay, so there's really no need for a search form. I just want to see the information for that company. Right, one more time. So when we go back to manage companies, if I click on this link for ABC Inc., I just need the details to be displayed for that company. That's why there's really no need for a search form. We're going to hit next. And now to filter the information for that company, I need to filter based on the company ID. We're going to hit next. And in the advanced tab here, we're going to receive the value now externally, which is passed in the URL. And my parameter name has to be identical. So it has to be CID and value has to be required. Let me just explain this once, just in case you're new to the live stream or Caspio. We pass the ID from this page. So this is the passing. Okay, we pass. Now we need to receive this ID. And value has to be required for security reasons. Because if you don't pass anything in the URL, definitely don't display me any details for that company. So that's why value has to be required. Okay, and the parameter name was CID. We're going to hit next. And now what information do we want to see about the company? Well, let's have all of this information listed. And by default, you will see that everything is display only. In other words, read only. But you could, if you wanted to, you can make these fields editable for the Ecolab user to modify that information from the details view. I'll click finish. Let's grab our deploy code now. And we will find that page. Admin company details. Now here we're going to deploy 3 different data pages. We're going to begin by deploying the company details at the very top. And now let's save and let's publish this live really quickly. Admin company details. Now we should be able to see the details for ABC Inc. And I can update it. Now the correct way to do this, the whole update, if you're building this out, is to really initially have everything be read-only. That's the way I would do it, okay? So if I'm looking at this company, it'll be read-only. But what I would add is maybe an edit button or an edit link. And when I click on that button or link, maybe there's a pop-up here in the middle to modify the company details. Or it doesn't have to be a pop-up. You can go to a different web page where you can modify ABC Inc. and all the other information. That's really how most companies treat information when it comes to application, is to see read only, and then you can have a pop-up or go to a different page to modify the info. So now what we want is the ability to add users and view users that belong to this company, ABC Inc. So let's build out a form to add a user. So we need a submission form. We are going to hit next, and we want to link this to our user table. So this is going to store all of the customers that belong to each company, this table. Add user, or maybe just to be clear, add company user. Again, I will use the same style of blue, same localization of English, restrict access to our Ecolab member, and click next. We want all the fields in the form, so we're going to move them all to the right. Hit next, and now you can see the foreign key company ID. Right now it's exposed as a text field. Just imagine form down here that has the company ID field open. Okay, it's a text field. What we need to do is now pass this ID that we passed into that field. So now this field needs to receive this ID for ABC Inc. So what you want to do is now you can leave it exposed if you're testing things and you want to make sure that the ID is passed correctly. But you can also just simply hide that field and use the external parameter that we called initially as CID. That's the name of my parameter. And now you know that even though it's a hidden field, it's always going to pass and receive that company ID into that field. So when you submit this form, that company ID will be stamped in the user table. And there you have it. That's how this user is going to be associated with the company. Next, the name is likely going to be a required field. Email is immediately required by default because it's unique in our table. We want to create the password initially for our client. You could, when they log in with their password, you can immediately have them change the password to something else if you want to. Login status, I always like to hide the label and simply just say check to allow customer login. Sometimes, you know, when you're adding users, maybe there's some pending paperwork that they need to fill out. You want to add them into the system, but you don't want them to log in just yet. So you provide a checkbox for the Ecolab user to say, okay, I'll add him, but I don't want him to log in just yet, or her. Or you can check the box immediately and they should be able to log into the application. And then finally, date created. Why don't we just make that a timestamp? Click next. And I don't need to see a display message. I'm just going to reload the form. The reason being is when I add a user and I hit submit, there's really no need for a confirmation message because once I hit submit, I should be able to see that user here immediately added here to my left. So that's why we simply just reload the form, hit finish, and now let's deploy that data page. Grab our embed code, copy it, and inside here we have new user. Okay, let's publish. Same as before. All right, we should be able to see that form added right over here. Remember, there's a hidden field here that's actually receiving this ID. And once I hit submit, we will stamp that ID into the user table. Why don't we add Becca Jones, Becca J at abcinc.com. That's the name of this company, ABC Inc. So we're just adding an additional user because they wanted to pay for one more license for this user. And then I'll just create a very simple test password and I want Becca to be able to log in immediately. We'll hit submit, save, and we should now be able to see Becca's information here, but we need to build that data page. So let's go back here and build out that data page. Reports, tabular format, and based off of the user table, let's call this view manage company users. Again, blue style, localization of English, restrict access to Ecolab user, hit next. And again, no need for a search form. Although you could have a search form. Let's say this company, they're paying for 300 employees that need to log in. Let's still use the same example of manufacturing company where they're tracking waste output and maybe some carbon emissions. But you have multiple employees who need to log in and be able to track these things. And if you have, I don't know, 300 for that company, then it may be beneficial to have a search form so you can quickly find that user. But I don't know. Initially, maybe you won't. That's why I would suggest maybe having just a list of users initially. That's why I would say no need for a search form right away. Click next. Once again, we need to be able to display these users that belong to this company. So that's going to be my filtering field. And same setup as before, receive the value externally as CID. Value required. The reason why this value is so important that it's required is because on this page, we pass this ID, but in order for me to see the users for that company, we need to filter based on this company ID. That's the only way you're just going to see users that belong to that company. So that's why this value is required. And now let's display maybe the name of the user, email, login status, and date created. We might, enable an inline edit. If you want to remove a user for the company, you can do an inline delete as well. I'm not going to make any changes here. Let's just continue. Let's display 25 users. Why don't we enable a details page for this one? And let's have the name field, a name itself, be the link that takes us to the details view. And in the details page, you can display all of that information along with the ability to update the password on behalf of that employee or that customer. So we should be able to change the name. It's going to be a required field. We should be able to change the email. Maybe we have the ability to change the password on their behalf. And then for login status, that's going to be a checkbox, and we'll simply say check to allow customer login. Maybe you want to deactivate somebody's account as an Ecolab user, and date created will likely be a read-only field, and we will just simply hit finish. And now let's take a look at this data page. We are going to deploy that here, and let's push that live. And we are, for now, going to be finished with the admin portion of the application. Okay, so there's Becca Jones as well. So not only do we see the company details, I can now add a new user for this company ABC, and I'll be able to see who's active. In other words, who can log in and who cannot log in. Okay, and the final data page, we're going to build this later on, but now we have the ability to add companies and manage users for each company. Now let's flip over to the customer side where we want to be able to add activities and add metrics for each activity. So that should be a very simple build. Let's close this folder for now. And then on the customer folder, we are going to build a data page, submission form, to be able to add an activity. So we have the blue style, we have the localization English, and this time we want to restrict access to the customer login. So likely we will need all of our fields on the form. We're going to hit next. And now for the user ID. Depending on who the customer that's logged in, if it's me, if it's Becca, if it's some other user from ABC company or a different company, what you want to do is make this field hidden, and on load, we're going to use the authentication method to automatically stamp that user's ID that's logged in. So we were able to see both methods on how we can stamp the primary key into the related table. One is using the query string parameter passed in the URL, and this one is using the authentication method. So whoever is logged in, if it's Becca, if it's me or some other user, we can automatically stamp the user's ID into the activities table. For activity type, definitely going to be a required field. We're going to turn this into a dropdown because we have a lookup table. I will use both custom values and lookup table because under custom values, I always like to, my default value to be something generic. We can say select activity type, delete the value. You don't want this to be stored in your table. And then for lookup table, we have one that's listing all of our activity types, which can be manufacturing, water usage, electric, and some other ways of improving performance. Name is going to be a required field. Activity date is going to be a required field. We will click finish to save. And now let's deploy this data page into customer new activity. Save. Let's push that live. And we should be able to see that form now. So I know that I logged in as myself. Okay, that's the sample user that's logged in, np@abcinc.com. So now as me, I can say, something, transportation maybe, or water usage. Let's just say activity name. What can be the activity name? I'm always so bad at coming up with something on the spot. Office water usage or something like that. Activity date today, we'll hit submit. So your submission was successful. Now I should be able to see that under my activities. However, we need to build a data page that's going to list Ned's activities. So let's go ahead and build that data page. Reports. And that's based off of the activities table. And we're going to call this view my activities. Style is going to be blue. Localization will be English. And very important here, which we haven't covered yet in today's live stream, is record level. Oh, sorry. Restrict access to customers first. Sorry about that. And then on this page, we have something called record level security, RLS, because we want Ned just to be able to see his own activities. Okay, so that's how we have to enable RLS, and we have to match these up, user ID to user ID. And now Ned, when logs in, he's only going to be able to see the activities that are linked to his ID. If Becca logged in, she would be able to see activities linked to her ID, and so on and so forth. So we just have to ask a question here. Should we build a search form for Ned and Becca to be able to find their activities? It all depends on how many activities they will have. And that's where you have to make the call yourself in your application if it makes sense. Let's have a search form. Let's have the results appear underneath the search form. Let's display the results on the initial load. Click next. And why don't we just have the ability to search based on activity name, just for the simplicity here. Yeah, you'll probably have activity date as well, but just to speed things up, let's have activity name. We're going to use, once again, we're going to use contains to search, click next, and then on the results page, I want to see the activity type, activity name, the date, click next. You can enable inline editing here as well if you want to quickly, as Ned or Becca, change the activity name. Let's say you typed in something and you misspelled something as you submitted the activity. You can quickly fix it. And what we need to add here now is another HTML block, because each activity is going to have multiple metrics that we can add. It's a one-to-many. Okay. So we are going to call this view add metrics. Again, it's just plain text. So we will highlight it, click on the link button. And now the name of my web page that we track that is called customer _ add _ view _ metrics. Such a long name. I could have abbreviated that or shortened it. Customer add view metrics. All right, so customer add view metrics.html. Question mark to initiate the protocol for passing of the parameter. Parameter name is going to be AID, which stands for activity ID, =, and then we want to pass the activity ID to the subsequent page. We'll click OK. That turns into my link. Just remember in the source to remove the HTTP like that, especially if your web page is in the same directory. If you're redirecting the user to a completely different directory of your web page, you might have a folder for, I don't know, lab, and then you add a / to redirect the user to a completely different directory of your web page. Okay, I think I'm good with that. Let's click next. Now, one thing that I do have the activity date. So what we could do on the results page is sort our submissions based on the activity date to show me the most recent submission first. That works for me. And no need for a details page on this data page, because we're going to build, once again, we're going to build a custom details data page. And click finish. Let's deploy. Grab our embed code, go into our Notepad++, and begin with my activities. Paste. Customer, my activities. Okay, I should be able to see that submission for water usage. Okay, that we just added not long ago. And you can see how I'm sorting my data based on dates submitted with the most recent first. So we're almost done. Let me just check time. I probably just need maybe 10 or 15 more minutes of your time and we'll be done with today's build. The next step is now that we are able to add an activity as a client or a customer, I should be able to now add metrics for this activity. And now we once again need to build out 3 data pages, just like what we did on the company, on the Ecolab user side. It's the same exact thing. Instead of adding users for each company, now we add metrics for each activity. But first we'll begin by creating an activity details data page. So reports, custom details page, based off of the activities table, view activity details, blue style, English localization, restrict access to our customer, click next, and we want to filter data, click next, and we're going to filter the activity based on the activity ID. In the advanced tab, we're going to receive the value once again externally. We call the parameter AID and value must be required. We're going to hit next. I want to be able to see this information for my activity. Click next. We're going to keep everything as display only. It's up to you. You can make these modifiable if you wish. We're going to hit finish. And now we can deploy this data page in this page. So this is for my activity details. Save. Let's push this live. Customer add view. All right. So we should be able to see the activity. And if I go to a different activity, let's say not water usage, but transportation, we're going to be able to see the details for that activity. That's really all I did, is simply link my details to my activity in 2 different web pages. So from this web page called Customer My Activities, I can see the list of all the activities. But on this web page, I'm able to see the details of that activity because I'm passing the ID and I'm receiving the ID. That's it. To use an analogy, maybe baseball, like pitching and catching. Okay, it's the same idea. You just have to know how to wire this using the data pages. All right, next thing we're going to build is the ability to add a metric for each activity. So let's build this form. Based off of the metrics table, add metric, blue style. Once again, it's repeating. I need all my fields on the form. Remember, we passed the activity ID. If you remember now, hopefully this is starting to make sense now. We passed the activity ID. My form now needs to receive the activity ID. So for that field, we're going to make it hidden. And what we want is to use the external parameter. The name was AID. Once again, same process as before. We make the field hidden. It's going to receive the activity ID. So when you submit the metric, you are stamping the activity ID in the metrics table, and that's how you associate all of your metrics back to the activity. Okay. Then we have the metric type. That's going to be a required field. Value is going to be a required field. Unit is going to be a required field, but we have a lookup table. Select unit. And we simply link our units table, which is going to turn into a dropdown. Once again, no need for a confirmation message on that form, because once you submit that form, you should be able to see that unit or that metric added here to the left. We're almost done. We have 2 more data pages left to create. Let's deploy this data page. Copy it. And in Notepad++, we will go ahead and paste that here. Save. Let's go live. There's the form. All right. And now for water usage, I can say metric type. Hold on 1 second. What was I using for other ones for metric type? I'm just curious. Oh, let me look at my live example here. Well, I called it the same thing, water usage for metric type. Okay. Metric type. Maybe I can change up some field names and things like that, but This is what I was given. All right, so what we'll do here is just simply say, I don't know, metric type used water to measure something. I don't know. I'm just making things up. Value is going to be 50, and we use 50 gallons for that. We'll hit submit. So the submission was successful, but we need to build a data page in order to view that metric here on the left. So let's build that data page. Reports, tabular format, based off of the metrics table. View activity metrics. Once again, blue style, localization English, restrict access, click next. And we are going to filter data, okay, based on the activity ID once again. So we hit next, based on the activity ID. We want to receive this value externally. AID is the parameter name, value is required, and now what information do we display regarding the metrics? So let's have the metric type, value, unit, and those fields. We don't need to display the IDs. We're going to hit next. Maybe you want the ability for inline edit. Let's say you added a metric, but you added a wrong value and you want to fix that. So you do inline edit for that. We hit next. We hit next. Or maybe you want to be able to add a totals and aggregation at the bottom where you do some kind of an average on that value across the board. So if you're adding metrics for that activity and you want to calculate the average for it, it's a simple way to do some simple calculation, or you can add your own custom formula here, format it the way you want. And again, if I had a date field in this table, which I should have, I don't have the date field, you could sort, based on the most recent metric added into that report. But I don't have that. We're going to hit next. No need for a details page. I'm displaying everything on the results page anyway. Let's click finish and let's grab our deploy code. And we have one more data page left to build and we are going to be done. Save and let's push it live. All right, I should be able to now see the one that I added. Again, if I had the date field, I can sort this with this being the most recent. And now we can see an average across all of these units. I don't know if this is going to be an accurate way, the way they're tracking things and measuring things. They have some custom formulas that are proprietary to them in some way. It's their own IP. So really the main concern for me for today's live stream is to just show the flow and how data pages are tied together. That's really the most important thing for them to see. But in terms of how they measure these units, calculate, and how they provide reports back to their client, they have their own intricate ways and sophisticated ways of how they're going to get those KPIs. The final thing that we need to build now is for Ecolabs to be able to see a dashboard of all of those submissions across the board from all the companies. And again, it's going to be a much more robust dashboard that they're going to set up, probably multiple data pages. They've already let me know that they've seen a few of my live streams in the past where I covered how to build dashboards with SQL and charts and tabular reports. So they know that it's possible. But because for us today, I'm trying to build just something very simple, I'm not going to build a complicated dashboard here for us today because we don't have the time. What I'm going to do is join 4 tables together. I want to join the companies table to the user table to the activities table, and activities table to the metrics table. That's how I'm going to be able to pull all the information from all 4 of those tables. Because if I'm running a search on the dashboard, I want to be able to see all the metrics for each company. But I don't have the company information inside the metrics table. I don't even have the company information inside the activities table. Company information is all the way inside this table. Okay, so we want to join all 4 of those tables inside the view. Now, if you haven't done this before, let's say we create the view here. Let's just say we call this EIT company stats. And you want to join the companies table to the user table, to the activities table, to the metrics table. Because if you think about it, all these tables are linked together because one company has many users. We're stamping the company ID inside the user table. One user has many activities. We're stamping the user ID into the activities table. And one activity has many metrics. We're stamping the activity ID into the metrics table. Now, you could join them all manually. It's easy. Just like with the steps that I just talked about, we know we have the company ID that joins to the user company ID. We have the user ID that joins the activities user ID. And then you have the activity ID that joins with the metrics activity ID. And that's how you do that, manually. Okay, but a quicker way, if you don't want to manually join these tables inside the view, is to go back to tables, click on relationships, which you should be doing anyway, just so that you can understand your schema and how all of your tables link together using primary keys and foreign keys. We have the companies table, we have the user table, the activities, and we have the metrics. And you can move these tables anywhere you want, however you want, depending on your preference. Personally, I like to work left to right. Some people like to work top to bottom. But now you're going to be able to see how we join all four of these tables. Company ID joins to company ID in the user table. Okay. You have some settings here that you can modify. For example, if I want to display the company name inside my user table and on the data page, I can select that and hit create. And just from this simple illustration, you should be able to see that one company has many users, one to many. But we also know that one user can have many activities. So we join the user ID to the user ID. Primary key to the foreign key. Once again, name, use display on data page, click create. And one activity can have many metrics. Okay, activity name, display, and then here you can also enforce some referential integrity as well, just so to explain if you're new to Caspio or in database. Let's say, for example, you enforce referential integrity between your activities table and your metrics table. And say, for example, you decide to delete a activity from your table, and that activity has linked metrics in the other table. It's not going to let you delete that activity because you're enforcing referential integrity between these two tables. So that's the idea. If you check this box and somebody, let's say, accidentally tries to delete the activity and that activity has linked metrics, it won't let you do that. The system, it's a guardrail. The system will prevent you from doing that. Now, let's say you check this box. Be very careful with this one, cascade delete, okay? Very, very careful with this checkbox. Now, if you delete the activity in your application, not only do you delete the activity, but you also delete all the related entries in the metrics table as well. That's what cascade delete allows you to do. And cascade update, say we stamp this activity ID 1,000 times inside the metrics table, which will be the case. And you update the activity ID to something else. Well, now that change will propagate throughout the entire metrics table. So now all 1,000 metrics will have that same ID. That's what cascade update does, okay? Just wanted to give you a quick summary of what these three checkboxes do. But in any case, once you set up your tables in this view, the relationship screen, and you save your layout, watch what happens now when I try to build that view based on those four tables. So we're going to call this EIT underscore company stats. And we join the companies table to the user table, to the activities table, and to the metrics table. Automatically, Caspio set up that view for me. I did not have to manually join these tables because the relationship screen I've already defined all of my one-to-manys, and then the view is automatically built for me. Okay, just a little shortcut if you don't want to have to worry about building the view yourself manually. So now we click finish. Oh, I already have the same view name in a different application, so I'm just going to add an underscore to make it unique and click finish. Now the view is going to display all the company information, all the user information, okay, all the activity information, and all the metric information. And now I can build my report based on the view, which is really cool because now my report can display information from all 4 of these tables, not just one table or the other. Okay, so now back to data pages. Inside the admin folder, we build the data page. And let's go with the combination chart and report. Click next, and my data source is going to be the view. And now I can pick fields from all 4 tables you'll see in just a second. So let's call this Ecolab's dashboard. Style can be blue. Localization can be English. Restrict access to Ecolab. Click next. I would like to have a search form. Let's have the results underneath. Display the results. Click next. And now you can see on the left here that I can pick fields from all 4 tables. Okay, so let's search based on company name. Let's search based on activity type. And maybe you want to search based on the activity date. Click next. You will need to modify the label slightly because it carries over the name from the other tables. So you just rename this to maybe company name. And we can turn this into a dropdown, both, and we'll say search all companies as the default value. Make sure you delete the value in order to be able to, by default, pull up all the companies. And then the lookup table is going to be the company name and company name. You can also link this back to your companies table here if you'd like, and just display and search by the name. That's another way of doing it, because the companies table is already going to have all the company names anyway, or you can just do it based on the view. It's up to you. It really makes no difference. And then we have activity type. This can also be a dropdown, both. Search all activities, delete the value. And again, you can also link this back to your activity lookup table if you wish. And finally, we have the date, activity date. So for this one, we want to do a date range. So we're going to insert a new criteria, set the logical operator to and criteria 1 is going to be activity date from. This is going to be greater than or equal to. And criteria 2 is going to be the to field. And this is going to be less than or equal to. And this is how you set up a date range in Caspio. Greater than this date, less than that date. Now on the results page. So what information do we want to display? And so that I can avoid thinking about it, let me just look at my live example so that I can see what fields I use, because I already gave this a little bit more thought earlier. Company name, activity type, metric type, and value and unit. Okay, that's easy enough. Company name, activity type, and then we have, well, maybe we can add activity date. That's okay. Metric type, value, and unit. Click next. Next, and then we have the company name. We have the activity type. We have the metric type, value, and unit. But for value, you could also, enable aggregations if you'd like. I'm going to enable grouping on the company name and have a collapsible group expanded by default. You can see that I would like to enable grouping so that we can expand and collapse these companies. I'm also grouping based on activity type and metric type. So here under the activity type, we enable grouping. And on metric type, we also enable grouping. And then we can insert a totals and aggregation for value. And maybe we can do a average. So we'll do an average on that field. And in the advanced tab, I would like to do an average on group level aggregation for all groups. And we'll see what that looks like. We might come back and make some changes to it. It's all about trial and error, until you get to the point where you like the way your results look. We hit next. We'll hit next. And then for the chart, why don't we do a stacked bar chart? Click next. A title can be stats by company. We'll do have a series. So for category Y, on my Y-axis, I would like to display the companies. For the series, I'd like to have the activity type. So if I'm looking at my stacked bar chart, I want that bar chart to be broken down based on activity type. So I can see manufacturing process, maybe water usage for that specific company on the Y-axis. And then for the X-axis, we don't really need to do anything. Why don't we just do an average on the value field? That works. Click next, next. No need for a details page. You can enable it if you want to, but I will just click finish to complete everything. We'll grab our deploy code. And to finish everything off, we are going to go back to our notepad and admin dashboard. Admin dashboard, we will just paste our deploy code. And that's it. Let's push this live. Admin dashboard, and we have our whole entire application completed, where we now have the ability to search. Oh, one thing that in my live example, you can see I'm using a list box to do a multi-select on the keyboard. You can hold control to do a multi-select. So if you're looking to compare two companies side by side, things like that, or maybe I did not enable multi-select on the activity type. But let's do that really quickly so that we have the same exact look as my live example. Here I have two drop-downs, but we'll go back to my data page really quickly and modify the search form. All right, so for the company name, I would like that to be a list box. In the advanced tab, we want to allow multi-select. Let's display 5 at a time. Activity type is also going to be a list box. In the advanced tab, allow multi-select. And finally, in my live example, I have 4 columns. So here we're going to say section. I want this to be in 4 columns with the label on top, so that my data or my fields don't appear stacked one on top of the other. I want them all side by side. So now we will hit finish, reload that report, and we should be able to see multi-select and multi-select on the activities, and including the date range. And underneath that, we have all of our data that we're calculating. So that's one way to build a report based on 4 different tables, because in a database, when it comes to building the correct database structure, you want to follow this flow of stamping the primary key as a foreign key, and then from that table, which is your related table, you can have a primary key be stamped in another related table. And it's like a chain that you just keep going down a line. You could also have a many-to-many, but you got to be able to set up your tables correctly from the get-go in order to have the proper structure in place, the foundation. And then when it comes to building data pages, that's the easy part. You just build them on top of your tables. Okay. So this is it. This is the application. And what Ecolabs, this fictitious company that I created, is going to do now is provide reports to their clients to let them know how they can reduce carbon emissions or, waste, to be able to please their stakeholders. And this is just for manufacturing, but of course you can have different industries, different companies that they will be providing this service or this incentive for their employees to log in, submit data, and then they can run these complex reporting in the back end and provide the reports. So that was the idea. I hope you enjoyed today's live stream. Thank you so much for attending. I appreciate your attendance. Hopefully we learned something new today. I don't think we ever did a live stream where I joined 4 different tables together and build one report on 4 tables inside the view. So I think that's a first for the live stream. So if you did like the live stream, please give us a thumbs up. It really does help with the algorithm. So thank you so much, Joel. I know you were here. I know a few other people are here as well. So again, thank you so much. We will be back in 2 weeks. Thanks, Steven, for the feedback. I really appreciate that. Don't have a topic in mind yet. There is somebody who sent me something recently. I can't remember the exact use case now, but it's something to do with finance, to build a personal finance app. I'll have to take a look at the details, but we might be covering something on finance next. Once again, if anybody has a suggestion for the live stream, you can definitely send me an email. Here's my email in the chat window. If you'd like to see something created in the live stream, let me know. It doesn't even have to be a full use case. It can just be a one-off feature, and I will likely be able to include that in the use case. Just note that, you know, we're building it live in front of people, so it will be exposed and available for anybody else to use and build what you're after. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate your time. We'll see you in 2 weeks' time. And as always, this application that we created today will be available as a download in the YouTube description. Just come back in the afternoon, give me a little bit of time to prep everything, and you will see a link where you can download this use case and import it into your account if you want to learn from it and see how everything was created. All right. With that said, have a good week, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time, and all the best. All right. Take care. Bye-bye.